Hi there, friends. This is Barb Pask. Tonight's going to be a little bit different. This is going to be more of an instructional video, probably two parts. I'm thinking we'll just spend some time here talking, and then I may paint this setup next time. I want to talk to you about painting from life. I think painting from life will help you grow tremendously as an artist. One option you have is plein air, which isn't for everybody. It's so challenging. Physically, a lot of people can't do it. You go out, you take a lot of stuff, drag it sometimes a long way. Wind, bugs, cold, and one of the biggest things is the ever-changing light. So try it. I mean, I enjoy doing it. I'm going out tomorrow. But the other option is to paint a still life. Even if you don't love still lifes, consider painting them, especially if you're new. You might pause this and grab a pen and paper, because hopefully I'll have some good information for you here. If you're a more experienced painter, maybe it's just something to think about in a refresher course. I wrote down, made some notes tonight. Something I've been thinking about doing for a while. Okay, again, we're talking about still lifes. I love still lifes. Let me tell you why they are nice. You get to choose, you make your story up. You choose your items. Either something that maybe challenges you to paint, or something that you love, maybe something you've had for years and you love it. So first you choose your objects, okay? The next thing you're going to do is set them up in a composition, because composition is just everything, so important. The eye likes an odd number of items. As you can see, I have 3 items here. You can do one object, just don't dead center it. Matter of fact, if you're newer to painting, I would choose one object. Could be a simple object like an apple. Set it up, paint it smaller quickly, and then move on and do another one. Do it frequently. I think you'll see a big improvement in your work. But what I love about it is, again, I choose objects that I love. In this setup here, the focal point, which you can probably tell, is going to be the blue and white container. For a couple reasons. It's the darkest and lightest thing. It's patterned. And the lemons hopefully will lead you into the focal point. But first you pick your items and you set them up. Set them up, and what I would recommend to you is, you think you've got it set up like you like, I would take a photograph of it and look at it in your photograph and see if you like it. If not, move it and photograph it again. I have done setups for groups and set them up several different ways and photographed them each time, and then I look at the photos and I decide what setup looks better to me. But once you got your items, you set them up. Then you get to choose your background. What color do you want? Do you want pattern? This is just an illustration board, but I can drape fabric over it. Then your foreground. What do you want here? You want color, you want pattern. And then lastly, you hit it with a light, which changes everything. I've turned the overhead light off, so hopefully you can see this a little bit better. But when you've got a light on it, you have highlights on the container, highlights on the lemons. I know it's a little blown out still. And shadows. Shadows are really important too. They can be a really important part of your composition. But still lifes tell a story. And again, even if it doesn't interest you, please consider doing it. I'm looking over my notes here. As far as setting up still lifes, there are some basic rules to it. People tend to overlap items. You want to think about that. You don't want to, they call it kissing. You wouldn't want to just touch the edge of that container with the edge of that lemon. Tangent is another word you'll hear people throw around, tangents. Like the top of this lemon, you would not want the fabric to come right across at the top of the lemon. So little things to watch for, and you'll see that if you photograph it first, you'll probably catch it. Again, I haven't spent a lot of time setting this up. It's pretty simple, 3 items, but I love blue and white, so that's why I went for blue and white. And I chose the lemons because orange is the complement to blue, but lemon, it should make the blue pop too. Again, decide your focal point. Try to lead the eye into your focal point. And you want to paint as the eye sees. When you're looking at an object, like in this painting, hopefully you go to that blue and white container. That will be my focal point. That's the object that, again, is darkest and lightest, most detailed. That is where I may have some hard edges. Hard edges brings the object forward. And your eye, when you focus on, when you're looking at whatever it is, that's the thing that's more in focus to you, is where you're looking. Everything that goes away from there should be softer. So, you know, you're looking right here. These are, anything that goes away from your focal point should have softer edges, because that's how the eye sees. If you put hard edges on everything, if everything's important, nothing's important. Your eye just jumps all over the canvas. If you're a person that paints from photographs, which a lot of people do, and I do too, because that's your only option sometimes, I wouldn't just do that. I mean, consider painting from life. I wouldn't recommend you paint out of your head. I know people that do it, and generally you can tell. You need a reference, or you need an object. You need something. Next thing you want to do is, once you've got your setup as you like it, and your light on it, and your screen, and you think you're ready to go, I would do a little thumbnail sketch. Take a little pad. You can first sketch the items in if you want, and then put your canvas around it. Or put your square there for your canvas and then sketch your items in, whatever works for you. You can go so far as to squint and sketch in the values that you see. Like I wouldn't do any more probably than 3 values. They even make a set of markers that you can do value sketches with. So important, and I'm sure you know that, is to learn to draw. For myself, I don't do a real precise, detailed sketch on my canvas. The trouble with doing that is it becomes sometimes like a color book image, and you fill in those lines. You don't want to paint like that. We're painting, we're not drawing. You will get much more interesting edges if you paint into the edge and back, you know, out to the edge and back into the edge. You will get much more interesting edges. But I personally don't do a lot of a sketch, but I feel like I know how to draw pretty well. If you don't know how to draw and you find yourself adjusting and adjusting and adjusting, which a lot of us do that, and we'll do it no matter how experienced you are, you find yourself, well, wiping off even sometimes, but you will tend to muddy up your colors if you do that. Okay, let's see what else we've got on here. I tend to paint dark to light, thin to thick, and large to small. And that's how most oil painters paint. And I tend to try to do the whole painting at one time. Try not to, okay, say we start this painting and we spend a lot of time getting this in perfectly and precise. Then you don't want to touch it. It becomes very precious to you, and you don't want to go back. You want to block in the large shape, block in the lemons, get the background in, the foreground in, and get the canvas covered. And then go back and start. That's how I paint. And then I go back and start reassessing things. But try to finish them in the same degree. You know what I mean? As you go along, jump around. All the fine details should be the last things you do at the end of your painting, your highlights and fine detail. But don't make anything too precious. You got to be willing to wipe it off if you have to even, and adjust it. I mean, don't keep moving forward if you know it's not working and it's a bad painting. It's okay. I mean, who needs another painting? Most of us don't. I'm in this to grow as an artist and be a better artist. If you're in this to make money, you're probably in the wrong profession. Not that you can't make money at it, but you need to be in it for the love of it. You know, if people ask me what I want out of it, most of all, I want to be good at it, and I want to be respected for being good at it by my peers. You know, selling's a bonus, trying to pay for supplies, and I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong, I love it, but I'm mostly in it because I love painting. There's different ways. Well, we'll move to the canvas here in a minute. Like I said, I'm probably not going to paint it tonight, but we'll talk about it. Different ways to start, and we'll talk about that. I'm a fan of Helen Van Wyck. I've mentioned her many times. She has some videos on here, and I remember watching her paint, and she wouldn't necessarily start with a dark. She would pick like a mid-tone and mass in the whole objects, and then she would come back and introduce lights and darks. And you can do that. There's a good chance, even if you start, like I'm looking on this, I would put that dark color, that's my darkest dark, I would put that in first. But there's a good chance you're going to come back later and reintroduce some more darks or lights, or, you know, you do what you have to do to make it work. We will paint this first, and the pattern, again, will go on at the end. As far as sketching on the canvas, sometimes I use a pencil. I have used charcoal. The disadvantage to charcoal is it ends up in your paint. You can thin down paint, which you've seen me do over and over, and with a small brush sketch it on. You can, let me turn the overhead light on and we'll move you over. I turned it off hoping you could see the setup better. I've got a little 5x7 panel here, probably smaller than I would prefer to paint it on. I probably would prefer an 8x10. But let me talk about some ways that you could get this on the canvas. Again, pencil's fine. I do use pencil. Common mistake I find with a lot of newbies is they tend to paint small and right in the middle. Excuse my overhead light, it flickers some till it's on for a while. Fill up the canvas with your painting. Fill it up. You can run objects off even, that's okay to do. But it's a lot more interesting if you fill it up. You can paint life size, you can paint smaller than life or larger than life, whatever makes you comfortable. Some objects feel awkward larger than life, I find. I notice in my own work, I generally tend to paint smaller than life or life size. I don't frequently paint larger than life. For some reason, I just don't. Things we haven't covered yet, let's see. One thing I wanted to mention too is if you paint white objects like white pictures, you can go pretty dark and an object still feels white. One particular thing you have to be careful of is with white objects, you're going to have a highlight on them. You have highlights, so everything on that white object has to be darker than that highlight for that highlight to stand out. So keep that in mind. People talk about never using pure white. Generally I don't, and I've heard that over and over. But I get a newsletter from Mark Boges, who is a phenomenal painter, and he was talking in that letter how he used pure white the other day on some rocks that he painted. So who's to say? Again, once you learn the basics and you get things really down, I mean, try to paint what you see. Try to learn to paint what you see. Your style will find you as you move along. And later on, you may be a very loose painter, and maybe you'll still do still lifes, and you'll set them up, and they will just be your inspiration. Your painting may be very loose and very different. That's up to you. But try to learn to draw and paint what you see first. Again, don't worry so much about your style. I do believe it finds you. I've had people say that to me. I can tell your work, and that's nice, because I haven't tried to come up with, and you just paint. You paint and it happens. Okay, that's a lot of what I've got on here, so let's talk about how I would get this on here. I always, when I paint from life, use a view catcher. This is a very dirty little view catcher. It has been through a lot. I will take it outside with me tomorrow. If I got outside and forgot it, I would really be upset with myself. But it's called a view catcher. It adjusts for the size canvas you paint. So inside and outside, it's a great tool, because you set it for your canvas. This is a 5x7. Okay, and you look through there and decide. Especially outside, this is great. It is overwhelming outside. Where to start, where to stop. It is, you really, truly need this. But even inside, I can look through this and look over there at my setup. I can use a brush and see what's hitting center, vertically, horizontally. I can decide what looks pleasing in my eye. I can move it around. Over the years, I've done a lot of setups with groups, and it's very interesting to see. We all stand in different places, so of course we have a different perspective on it, and everybody does them different. It's interesting. I always find it very interesting. One gal in particular that I had painted with, she tends to get off to the end of a setup. Very interesting. I like her work. So here's what I would suggest to you if you're a newer painter. This is something Helen Van Wyck did. Another tip from her is, I'm looking through my view catcher. Now, I want to fill the canvas, so about to there. Now, what she used to do was she would just do like big circles. Okay. She'd do like this kind of thing. Okay, this is going about here. Lemon's going about here, the other lemon about here. And she would just do this kind of thing. And I think it's great. Otherwise, if you get to sketching an object and maybe you're not real good at that yet, you may find that it didn't end up where you wanted. It's too large, it's too small. But if you kind of decide, let me get just a dab of water here. That I want that in that area there, well, you need to, that's about where it has to go. This lemon's behind this one. Okay, so that's one way to start, and that's not a bad way at all. You can wipe some of this off if you want as you get going. Again, kind of sketch it in, has handles. And even use anything you can use to help you get the proportions. Like even if you want to kind of draw this pattern in, I do this with animals that are multicolored. It really helps to get the dimensions right if there's, but use whatever tool you've got to help you get things correct. When I'm doing like a little vase maybe that has a top on it, even if there's a neck on it, I'll go back and forth across the top to get it symmetrical. Turning it upside down is another great tool to check and make sure things feel symmetrical. You can, as you go here, you could ignore the handles in the beginning and just kind of get the shape and add the handles, whatever works for you. Another thing you can do, I took a workshop one time where she had us do this kind of thing. Okay, we just kind of build it, like Here's your top. We just kind of went this way and worked our way down, and we created it that way. We kind of sketched the object in that way. That's something else you might consider. This is called an ellipse. You frequently have it's the top of a container, and they can be tricky. You can look to see how much space you have from the back of it to the front of it, if that helps you. But this is how we would start in that workshop, and we just masked in things this way. The disadvantage to that is you've got paint on here. So you could wipe it off, you could let it set up first, whatever you wanted. And again, your shadows are always part of your composition too. Sometimes a really important part of your composition, I've got shadows around the base of the lemons. And like I said, I think what we'll do is we're not going to paint this tonight. I just thought we'd talk about the process and make it a short video, kind of get it ready for next time. But again, I don't worry too much about my sketch being perfect. But again, use whatever tools you got. Okay, look, I'm looking at the side here. Where does this lemon hit, the top of this lemon, in relation to this? Okay? And we don't want, another thing you want to watch for, the lemon is in front. I want to make sure it ends up down in front, not even with this. It's not where it is. And lemons obviously are yellow, and I've talked about that too before. Some people, when they put yellow in a painting, that's the first color they put in, because they want to keep the yellow nice and clean. So again, we're not going to paint this tonight, but I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to leave it set up, and but we're going to go in and wipe this off. But the way we'll start this is we won't put, the pattern to be, again, in the highlights will be the last thing that goes on it, as it should be. Another way you can do this is you can block your whole, mention all these ways I can think of while I'm at it. Another way you could do this is you can block your whole canvas in with a transparent red oxide would be good, burnt sienna, and then you can come in and remove and create your sketch. Remove paint and create your sketch. So that's another way you can do it. Before I start these objects, I could go in and paint the whole background, paint it in. That would be fine too. I tone. I'm sorry if I keep saying it's just a bad habit. You can tone your canvas, which I do frequently. I like doing that. I like the effects that you can get. In the last painting, last video I did, I painted over an old painting. Hopefully you watched that. Got a lot of work to do to it yet, but the big goose I liked well, and it ended up, because it was an old painting, she ended up with kind of a rim of a pink along the edge of her chest, which I like, and I probably will leave. But when you tone, you get, unexpected color peeking through sometimes, and it can be very nice. So there's our proportions, and that's not bad. Let me look over our notes one more time. Again, if you can't go out and paint, consider doing still life. Please give it a go. Choose, even if still life's not your interest, maybe it's animals. It helps your drawing skills. It helps in paint mixing, helps in edges, color choices. I mean, it's good for you in so many ways. Choose objects that you love so you're excited about painting them. Even again, if you're not a still life painter, you've got to have objects that are precious to you. And composition's everything. Bad composition equals a bad painting. I do look at a lot of artist magazines, and I do have to say, over the years, I have seen people do still lifes that are not your traditional setup. They randomly set objects. I mean, it doesn't follow the rules in any way. And sometimes they work, But I wouldn't jump in and do that. I would, keep things pretty traditional for a long time. When I was learning to paint, I wanted to paint everything. And I have to say, I am willing to paint anything. And I think a good artist is. I am willing to go outside. I will paint still lifes. I paint animals. I will paint a live model if I get the opportunity. I will try anything. Why not? Why not? Everything doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It just doesn't matter. I always joke that if it works out, I meant to do that. If it doesn't work out, it was practice, So a good artist will try anything. Again, decide what your focal point is. For me, it's a pretty obvious focal point, I think, the blue and white. It's the darkest and lightest object, and turn you around again so you can see it. But I think it's a pretty obvious focal point. Well, that's a crazy ride, isn't it? That's good enough. But decide what your focal point is and try to lead your eye into your focal point, which is what I'm trying to do here. I will probably subdue these lemons some. I don't want your eye going here. I want your eye going here. So if that even means painting them less vibrant than they are, killing the yellow a little bit, I may do that. And how do you kill yellow? You kill it with the complement, purple. That's how you gray colors, with a complement. Again, I don't always do it, I admit it, but you should do a thumbnail sketch. If you're outside or you're inside, or you should do a little sketch and decide if you like your setup. For one thing, do you like it? You can sketch in, I'm saying again, I'm so sorry. Sketch in some values. At least 3 values is a good idea. And decide how to get it on the canvas. Going to use a pencil, charcoal, paint. Thin paint works fine, and you will see as we start painting. I'm going to try to paint it all at once. I'm going to jump around. I'm not going to finish this guy and then move here. Try to paint your whole painting at the same time, so everything's kind of in the same degree of finish. That makes sense? But if you watch me, you know it's like, oh, I got the canvas covered. So that's always my goal, is to get my objects blocked in, my background blocked in, and then I start reassessing things. Learning to draw, so important. Just can't, you just can't practice enough. So I talked about massing in your objects. And again, you go back and do what you have to do. I mean, you put the darks in first, but if they're not dark enough, you go back later. One of the last things I typically do is, like, I'll ground my objects with some really dark darks, ground them. Again, consider you could do large circles like I did on the canvas. I think that's a great way to start. I knew where those objects were going before I sketched them on. So consider doing that. It kind of keeps things where they belong. And fill your canvas up. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't paint a little dinky setup in the middle of a canvas with a whole lot of negative space. Negative space is not as interesting, and sometimes can ruin a painting. So fill it up. Run them off if you want. Some people don't like to do that. I don't have a problem with that. And again, don't do a real precise sketch to where you're afraid, where you're filling it in like a color book. Paint into the edge, out to the edge, into the edge, back and forth again. Like I say, you'll get interesting edges that way. So, all right, I will shut up. This was about a half an hour, which is kind of nice, a little short video. And I'm going to leave this set here. I'll be outside tomorrow, and I got a few things going, but I'll get back to it in a few days. And then I'll paint this for you, and we'll talk about it some more. But like and subscribe if you haven't. I would appreciate that so much. Getting close to that 1,000 mark. I keep saying that, and we'll give away a painting. And join me next time. I'll probably label this part 1, so watch for part 2. All right, thanks so much, and you have a wonderful evening.